Spring arrived in Wyatt's Crossing, Wyoming Territory, 1883, bringing with it a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The afternoon sun beat mercilessly on the town center, yet an icy atmosphere surrounded the wooden auction block. Neighbors from scattered homesteads and distant ranches had gathered not for livestock or land, but for something far more troubling, though they dressed it up with gentle words like finding placement and willing workers. Everyone understood the harsh reality unfolding before them. Standing on those weathered planks was Angela, all of 22, towering like a young oak, her frame as solid as a barn door. Barefoot and loosely restrained, she held her head high despite the circumstances. The townspeople stared as if she were some traveling curiosity from a medicine show. What fool would want that mountain of a woman? Someone jeered. She'd flatten any bed frame, muttered another voice. Those harnesses would snap like twigs, came a third cruel observation. The crowd drunk on their own cruelty, Angela's chest burned not from the desert heat, but from choking down each barbed comment as though it meant nothing. Her own kin, desperate and starving, had traded her to the trader for basic provisions and empty promises of survival. Too large to wed, they'd claimed. Better put to work than left to waste away. Auctioneer Clyde Hargrove's voice cut through the air like a rusty blade. We'll open the bidding at $50. 50 for a laborer strong as any draft animal. The crowd remained motionless. Angela's thoughts drifted to childhood, memories splitting firewood alongside her father in the mountain foothills, both of them laughing as they cleared their land together. Back then, her power had been celebrated, something that made her father proud. $40 then? Hargrove circled her like a vulture. Look at those arms! She could haul water for miles without breaking stride. Still nothing. Angela's bound hands trembled, not with fear, but with the sting of public humiliation. The crowd's mockery continued. Too massive to keep indoors. Probably devours more than a whole crew. She'd terrify Satan himself back to the underworld. 30. Who'll give me 30? The silence that followed felt sharp enough to cut bone. Hargrove's confident expression began to crack. 25 final bid. The mood turned sour as people began shuffling toward the exits. Angela felt her dignity crumbling with each passing second. Then came the sound of measured footsteps, calm and deliberate. A figure emerged through the parting crowd, broad shoulders beneath a weathered coat, hat pulled low, boots creating quiet authority with each step. Dennis Cole, a man whose name was spoken in whispers, who neither drank nor boasted, yet whose word on matters of land and cattle was absolute gold. He owned only what he needed, but commanded universal respect. He approached the platform directly, never hesitating. The murmuring ceased. Even Hargrove froze mid-gesture. Angela braced herself for more judgment. Instead, Dennis removed his hat, climbed those steps, and without hesitation, swept one arm beneath her knees and the other behind her back. Lifting her as though she weighed nothing at all, shocked gasps rippled through the square. Angela's breath caught in her throat. She should have resisted, but the moment his arm steadied her, an unfamiliar feeling flooded her chest. Genuine respect. Dennis faced the stunned crowd, then looked directly at Angela. His voice was quiet, yet it thundered across the square. You're exactly right for my world. The entire square fell into complete silence. No mockery. No whispers. Even the breeze seemed to pause. Angela's heart raced as he carried her down those steps, past every person who had ridiculed her. Not one word was spoken, yet something fundamental had shifted. A crowd that once saw her as a spectacle now watched as though witnessing something sacred. As Dennis turned the corner away from the square, Angela's first tear rolled down her cheek, not from shame, but from the simple miracle of being chosen. The wagon wheels creaked as they rolled away from Wyatt's Crossing. Angela sat rigidly on the hard wooden bench, the auction's echoes still haunting her laughter, whispers, humiliation. Only one voice had cut through the cruelty. Dennis Cole's. He now sat beside her, as quiet as the horse's steady hoofbeats on the trail. You weren't obligated to purchase me, she finally spoke. Wasn't purchasing, Dennis replied. Just ending a spectacle? Is that what I represented? Some kind of sideshow? He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached behind the seat, retrieved a folded wool coat, and offered it to her. For those rope marks, she hesitated before draping it over her shoulders. It carried the faint scent of pine and leather. I don't require pity. Good, I don't provide it. Silence returned not cold, simply incomplete. The trail wound through red hills dotted with sagebrush. Snow-capped mountains loomed ahead. Angela pulled the coat closer. Her wrists still ached, though not as much as the hollow feeling in her chest. Back in town, she'd been sold like livestock. Beside this quiet man, she couldn't define what she'd become. As sunset approached, 2 horsemen passed by. One tipped his hat mockingly. Still gathering strays, Cole? Dennis offered no response. Angela sensed the tension. They recognize you. Everyone seems to. Small community. What's their gossip? He paused. That I refuse bribes, don't drink, and won't marry for wealth. She blinked. That last one sounds pointed. Had offers? Didn't appreciate the conditions. She studied his profile. So you live in solitude? No wife, no family, and people consider you peculiar. He finally met her gaze. Do you think I'm peculiar? I think people fear what they can't comprehend, she said. I understand that feeling. He returned his attention to the trail, but his jaw relaxed. By twilight, the wagon entered a narrow canyon. Angela saw it then tucked into the valley like a well-kept secret. Dennis's ranch. The house was humble wood and stone construction with smoke curling from the chimney. A corral stretched eastward where horses grazed peacefully. No workers, no voices, just wind and creaking hinges. Angela climbed down and followed him inside. The interior was simple, clean, quiet. A rifle hung above the hearth, books lined the walls, and a faded photograph rested on the mantel. A young woman with gentle eyes and windswept hair. Angela paused. Your wife? Dennis froze at the stove, kettle in hand. Was going to be. He set it down, his voice dropping. Her name was Eliza. We were returning from visiting her mother when 5 men ambushed us. They wanted my horses. She didn't survive. Angela's breath caught. I'm so sorry. She was petite, he said. People claimed she wasn't built for ranch life, but she had fire. Wouldn't let anyone speak cruel words without defending herself. Angela stepped closer. You still love her? He nodded once. Some things never leave you, even when the world moves on. She turned away. The firelight illuminated the bruises on her arms. Then why bring me here? You barely know who I am. He met her eyes. Because I recognize something familiar. Not in your size, in your spirit. Angela looked down, her throat tight. You're not a stray, he said. You're someone the world misjudged. So was I. Angela looked at him again, and for the first time since Wyatt's Crossing, she didn't feel ashamed of who she was. Angela had never experienced silence like this before. Not the kind that muffled your ears like cotton, but the kind that resonated in your soul. Dennis's ranch was tranquil. No yelling, no commands, yet even freedom felt like an unfamiliar prison when you didn't know how to inhabit it. She moved through the house cautiously, trying not to bump furniture with her elbows or shoulders. The space wasn't cramped, but it felt constricting. Each dawn she rose early from habit, not desire. She chopped firewood, hauled water, swept the porch. Not because Dennis requested it, he never did, but because stillness made her feel purposeless, like she was waiting to discover her function. Evenings found them eating quietly by lamplight. He'd ask how she enjoyed the stew. She'd say it was adequate. He'd offer the final biscuit. She'd decline. He'd nod, but Dennis observed everything. One afternoon, she approached the front entrance and stopped. The doorframe, previously low enough to brush her forehead, was now taller. Dennis said nothing, simply passed her with a shovel over his shoulder. Whistling softly. Another day, a new chair materialized at the table, sturdier, wider, crafted from oak. For once, she didn't worry about breaking something by sitting. That evening, she said, "Thank you." He didn't look up. About time the house accommodated both of us. Angela didn't know how to respond. No one had ever made space for her before. He didn't regard her like others did. No calculations, no pity, just clear, steady eyes that saw her without flinching. Still, trust didn't come easily. She maintained her distance. He never violated it. Sometimes she caught him observing her split logs or mend clothing, not with curiosity, but with respect, as though he was learning. The silence lingered. The invisible barrier remained. She wanted to leave. He, she suspected, wanted her to stay. That tension sat between them like a coiled rope never pulled tight, never slacked. Then came the night at the saloon. They'd ridden into town for supplies. The general store had closed early, so Dennis suggested a drink. She hesitated, then agreed. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and sweat. Laughter rang too loud. Boots thundered across wooden floors. The piano clanged out of tune. Angela tried to make herself smaller, but there was no hiding someone like her in Wyatt's Crossing. The muttering began. Built like a barn door. Bet she lifts entire bed frames. She's yours. Cole, hope your ribs are insured. Dennis said nothing, just sipped his whiskey with a tight jaw. Angela stared at the floor until a drunk, red-faced and swaying, stumbled toward her. Hey there, big girl, he slurred. Bet you could hurl me clean across this room, huh? She turned away. He grabbed her wrist. That was enough. Dennis crossed the room in seconds. No shouting, no weapon, just a firm grip on the man's wrist. He twisted it. The mug dropped. The saloon fell silent. Dennis leaned in, his voice low and sharp. Touch her again, and you'll deal with me. The drunk stumbled backward, clutching his arm. Even the piano player froze. Angela's chest tightened, not from fear, but from what she saw in Dennis's face. Not anger, not pride, just calm protection. Outside, walking to the wagon, she said. You didn't need to do that. He looked at her. Yes, I did. She looked away, warmth spreading through her chest. At the ranch, she paused at the door. You're different from other men. Dennis met her eyes. You're different from other women, too. And for once, that didn't feel like a curse. That night, while coyotes sang in the hills, Angela sat in her new chair by the fire. Dennis across from her, two souls once broken and maybe, just maybe, beginning to heal. Days flowed quietly on the ranch. Angela began finding rhythm in the silence. Her body grew stronger again, not from punishment but from purpose. She fed the horses, helped repair fencing, harvested vegetables from the back garden. She slept more soundly, ate more fully. The bruises on her wrists disappeared, but questions still burned beneath her skin. Why had Dennis brought her here? And what else wasn't he telling her? It was late morning when she found herself organizing tools in the old storage barn. Dust hung thick in the air, and the scent of dry hay clung to every surface. While moving a trunk of spare nails and rope, she discovered a rolled set of papers half hidden behind a crate. She unrolled them slowly. Blueprints, detailed plans for new paddocks, expanded fencing, irrigation systems. But what caught her attention were the margin notes. Initials she didn't recognize, and symbols marked like territory boundaries. Angela squinted. Some symbols matched brands she'd seen on crates from the east pasture. Another matched the crest painted on wagons from a neighboring ranch. Redstone Holdings, the largest spread in 3 counties, run by a man she'd only heard mentioned in whispers, Silas Merritt. Angela rolled up the papers, her heart beating faster that evening. As they sat by the fire, she finally asked, "Who is Silas Merritt?" Dennis didn't look up. He continued sharpening his knife with steady strokes against the whetstone. I saw his mark on those blueprints. He paused. The knife stopped mid-stroke. After a moment, he set both blade and stone aside. He wanted to purchase this land, Dennis said. All of it, 10 years back. Angela waited. I refused. So he attempted another approach. Offered marriage to my fiancée, thinking I'd surrender if it came with a ring and a dowry. Her chest tightened. She refused. Dennis's voice lowered. She didn't get the opportunity. Cabin fire. No evidence. No witnesses. But the sheriff found boot prints outside. Not mine. Angela felt the chill long before the fire crackled. You think it was him? I know it was. Silence grew heavy between them. Only the flame spoke, licking against the stone hearth. Angela stared at her hands. Is that why you live like this? Alone? Dennis met her gaze. It's easier than watching people pretend justice comes to those who wait for it. Angela didn't answer, but that night she dreamed of smoke, of footsteps in darkness, of wounds that never fully healed. A week later they rode into town. Angela had come to collect leather from the tannery enough to repair 2 saddles. Dennis was meeting a supplier near the stockyard. She stepped into the market alley with her head high, shoulders squared. Then came the voices. "That's the giant girl, not girl beast. They say he took her in because she's strong as a mule, or maybe it's the land he's." After a cluster of women stood outside the fabric store, their smiles sharp as hatpins. One leaned closer, eyes glinting. "You married yet? Or just playing house for acreage?" Another snorted. "She looks like a bull in a bonnet." Poor man must have lost his mind. Angela froze. Her grip tightened on the leather bundle. She turned to walk away, but her boot caught the edge of a step. The package slipped from her arms, landing with a thud. The laughter started, sharp, vicious. Then came quiet footsteps. Angela turned and saw Dennis standing between her and the women. He knelt, picked up the bundle, brushed it off as though it were priceless, and placed it gently back in her arms. Then he turned to the women, his voice calm but clear. "These aren't hands for shame. These are hands that build, that save." The silence that followed was thunderous. Not a word from the group. Not even a breath. He looked back at Angela. "Ready to go?" She nodded. They walked away. No more laughter followed them. And for the first time in years, Angela felt something new bloom in her chest. Not pride, not defiance, something quieter, the longing. The wind carried whispers like wildfire through the dusty streets of Greer's Hollow. They began small murmurs behind closed doors, sideways glances at the market, but by week's end, the rumors had grown fangs. "They say she's cursed," one voice claimed. "Brings misfortune wherever she treads," said another. "Big as a barn and twice as dangerous." Angela heard it all. Each word felt like sand under her skin. At first she ignored them, kept her eyes forward, and continued her work. But when she walked through town with Dennis to gather supplies, she could feel how the street shifted around her. Conversations stopped. Eyes lingered too long. Mothers pulled their children closer. She didn't need Dennis to identify who orchestrated it. Randall Hayes, wealthy, ruthless, and always 2 steps behind morality. The man who tried to purchase Dennis's land, his reputation, and once his heart through the hand of a woman who was now gone. Failing that, Randall now turned to fear and rumor to destroy what he couldn't possess. Angela stared out at the hills beyond the ranch that night, her jaw tight, arms folded across her chest. The moon glinted off the iron horseshoe she'd just finished forging. She was skilled at this, building, repairing, making things last, but she wasn't certain she could repair the storm heading their way. Dennis stood behind her. "You're thinking about leaving?" he said quietly. Angela didn't turn around. "If I go, he'll have no reason to turn the town against you. The fires will die out." "No," Dennis said firmly. "They'll just burn someone else." Angela said nothing. The next afternoon, small hands tugged at her apron. Angela knelt down. The girl with tangled braids and dirt-smudged cheeks looked up with wide, serious eyes. "I heard them talking," she whispered. "About you leaving?" Angela gently tucked a strand of hair behind the girl's ear. "Maybe it's for the best." "No," Abigail said fiercely. "If you leave, they win, and I lose the only person who makes me feel safe." Angela froze. The words cut deeper than Randall's rumors ever could. She'd spent so long thinking she was too much, too big, too loud, too strong. But to Abigail, she wasn't too much. She was enough. She was protection. That night, the flames came. Not from gossip, but from lanterns and torches. Angela woke to the sharp scent of smoke. Through the barn window, she saw figures moving like shadows in the darkness. 5, maybe 6 men tearing down fencing, spoiling the horses. She ran barefoot into the cold, grabbing a pitchfork, heart thundering. The horses inside the stable were panicked, slamming against the walls, eyes wild with terror. One bolt could kill them, or her, but Angela didn't hesitate. She flung open the gate and stood between the terrified herd and the open night. "Easy," she whispered, spreading her arms wide. It's all right. I won't let them touch you. A man lunged toward her from the shadows. Before he could reach her, another figure tackled him from the side. Dennis Dot, and then came others, townspeople, men and women Angela barely knew. Some held tools, others came empty-handed, but not empty-hearted. They had come running not from fear, but for her. The standoff broke into chaos. Fists flying, men shouting, but no one laid a hand on Angela. The townspeople surrounded her, shoulder to shoulder, until the last of Randall's men fled. Silence settled like dust after a storm. Angela stood still, sweat mingling with the chill of the night, hair wild around her shoulders. Dennis stepped forward, his face bruised, his shirt torn, but his eyes only on her. Dot without a word. He wrapped his arms around her tight. Sure. Warm. She's not too big, Dennis said loudly, turning to face the crowd. She's the reason we're still standing. No one spoke. Then someone, maybe Abigail's father, nodded. Another man removed his hat. A woman stepped forward and touched Angela's arm gently, respectfully, and just like that, something shifted. Not in Angela, not in Dennis, but in the town. The fire had long been extinguished, but its heat lingered in Angela's bones. In the silence that followed the standoff, Dennis stood beside her beneath the stars. His face was turned to the hills where the wind carried only dust and old ghosts. Angela broke the stillness. Tell me, Dennis didn't ask what she meant. He simply nodded, eyes heavy. It was 3 years ago, he said, voice low. Randall came to me with an offer. Sighed, he wanted to buy the ranch. Said if I didn't sell, he'd find another way to take it. Angela folded her arms, jaw tense. I didn't take him seriously until he started appearing wherever Claire went, whispering to her, offering her a better life, more money, more peace. Claire? Angela asked. My fiancée, Dennis said. She wanted to stay. She believed we could outlast him. But one night, the barn went up in flames. She was inside. Angela's chest tightened. You think he did it? I know he did, Dennis said, eyes hard. But the sheriff said it was lightning. Freak accident, they called it. Randall's hands stayed clean. A heavy silence settled between them. Angela's voice was quiet. Is that why you kept me here? To fill her place? Dennis didn't answer right away. When he did, it wasn't defensive. It was honest. Maybe at first, he admitted. Maybe I saw a second chance? Someone strong enough to help me keep this land. Keep fighting, he turned to face her. But not anymore. Because you're not her. You're not anyone's shadow. You're the reason I still believe people like us deserve more than grief. Angela looked away, tears stinging at the edges of her vision. Not from sorrow, from recognition. Later that week, the town council called a public meeting at the chapel. The air was thick with tension. People packed the pews. Randall Hayes stood near the pulpit, smug in his tailored vest, flanked by his supporters. I warned you, Randall said, his voice loud and oily. I warned you all what would happen if we let a monster take root in our town. Gasps rose from the crowd. Dennis stood near the back, fists clenched. This woman, Randall sneered, was bought like cattle at an auction. And now she threatens our children, our livelihoods. You call it strength, I call it corruption. Angela rose slowly from the bench. Her boots echoed as she walked down the center aisle, heads turning, murmurs rising. She didn't speak at first. Instead, she pulled something from her belt, a woodcutter's axe. Not to threaten, but to hold as a symbol, she stepped onto the front platform, facing the room. If being strong is a crime, Angela said, voice calm and clear, then I am guilty. Silence. But don't forget, strength built your barns after the storm. Strength lifted your wagons out of the mud. Strength carved this town from stone and dust. She raised the axe slightly. This axe chopped firewood for the schoolhouse. It repaired the fence that kept your cattle safe. And last night it stood between your children and chaos. She turned to Randall. You call me a monster. I say you're afraid not of me, but of the idea that someone like me doesn't need your permission to be worth something. The chapel was deathly quiet. Then someone stood, an old woman. She nodded once firmly. A farmer rose next. Then a school teacher. One by one, townspeople stood. No cheers, no applause, just quiet defiance. Randall's smirk faltered. Angela stepped back, not victorious, but unafraid. She had spoken, and the town had listened. The dry season had turned the fields to tinder. Crops stood brittle under the weight of late summer heat, and even the wind carried the scent of something waiting to burn. That night, the fire came. Dennis saw at first an orange glow creeping up the ridge. He didn't need to guess. He knew. Randall had stopped whispering and finally bared his teeth. "They set the south field ablaze," he said. Bursting into the house where Angela was mending a tear in her coat, Angela stood immediately. "We have to move now. Get the buckets. Wake the neighbors." Within minutes, the bell at the church was ringing, a sound reserved only for death or disaster. And tonight it was both. They ran. Angela's legs outpaced most men, her strides fueled by fury and resolve. Flames licked the sky. By the time they reached the field, Dennis's crop, his livelihood, was already a wall of fire, but worse than the crop was the wind. It turned the blaze toward the barns, the town. "The lives of everyone nearby. We need a fire break," Dennis shouted. Angela's eyes swept the property. There was an old wooden livestock fence behind the barn 30 feet long, thick with rot and termites. "If we pull it down, it'll form a barrier," she said. Dennis blinked. It would take 10 men. Angela was already moving. She gripped the first beam. Muscles in her arms bunched and pulled. With a roar, she yanked, and the post cracked from its base. The townspeople watched in stunned silence as she moved beam after beam, the structure groaning like a beast in its final breath. Then, with one final heave, the entire fence came down, slamming to the earth with a thunderous crash. Right in the path of the fire, it worked. The flames hit the barrier and scattered, losing strength in the break. Buckets of water followed, men and women working side by side until the last spark died beneath their feet. When it was over, Angela stood soaked in sweat, ash coating her arms, the handle of a broken beam still in her hand. She turned and saw them watching the town, the ones who had once called her too much, too strong. A burden. Now they looked at her with awe, with respect, with gratitude. A man stepped forward, a rancher whose fence Angela had once helped mend in silence. "You saved my barn," he said simply. Angela opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Her throat was thick with smoke and something else, something deeper. Another voice followed. "Mine too. My daughter was in the house behind that barn." "You saved her." The crowd swelled around her, not to threaten or mock, but to thank. Dennis moved through them, eyes locked on her. He reached her side, his hand closing around hers, the one still gripping the broken beam. "She's not too big," he said, his voice steady. "She's the reason we're still standing." No one laughed. They nodded. One by one, heads turned from Randall, who stood near the road on horseback, flanked by only a few loyal men. Someone muttered, "Coward." "Didn't even bring a bucket?" Another, "He just watched," and then silence. Except for the distant crackle of dying embers and the steady breathing of a town that had just found its backbone. Randall turned his horse and rode away. This time, no one followed. The autumn wind carried the scent of baked apples and wood smoke through the town square, where lanterns swayed gently above rows of pies, hand-carved pumpkins, and ribbon-tied stalks of wheat. It was the harvest festival, once a celebration Angela had only heard about from a distance. Now she stood at the center of it. Children darted past with sticky fingers and ribbons in their hair. The townspeople milled about, not avoiding her gaze, but seeking it, smiling, nodding, thanking. It had been weeks since the fire. Weeks since Angela had pulled down a fence and, in doing so, built something new, trust. "Angela!" The mayor's voice rang out from the makeshift stage. "Would you come up here, please?" She hesitated for a breath, her palms suddenly clammy, but Dennis beside her touched her back gently. "You earned this," he whispered. She walked slowly to the stage. The crowd parted. No laughter followed. No whispers, only the sound of clapping, steady, genuine, growing louder with every step. She reached the platform. The mayor took her hand. "Miss Angela," he said, "once some people saw your strength as strange." Now we see it for what it truly is, a gift. This year's Harvest Festival isn't just about grain and fruit. It's about who kept the ground beneath us from burning. Please accept our thanks, the crowd roared. Angela blinked hard against the sting behind her eyes. Then Dennis stepped up beside her. He held something in his hand, a silver arm cuff, delicately engraved, old and polished smooth by time. My mother wore this, he said softly, though his voice carried. She gave it to my sister, and when she passed, I kept it, thinking I'd never find someone strong enough to wear it. Not strong in arms, but in spirit. He turned to Angela, his gaze steady. You were never too big. You were always just right for this town, for this life, and for me. The crowd hushed. He gently slipped the bracelet over her wrist. Angela looked down at it, then up into Dennis's eyes. The silver caught the lantern light, but it was the warmth in his gaze that held her still. People began to cheer loudly. Someone shouted, "About time!" And laughter rose, this time not cruel, but bright and full of joy. Angela smiled. Not the tight smile she'd learned to wear in pain. Not the polite smile to keep people at ease, but a true smile. Wide, unguarded, radiant. Dennis offered his arm. She took it, and together they stepped off the stage. The town swelled around them, no longer an audience, but a community. Children ran to her, asking about the fire, the horses, the fence. Women invited her to join the baking table. Men clapped her on the shoulder as if she'd been there all her life. No one said, "Too big." No one said, "Not like us." They said, "You belong here," and she did later that night. As music played and dancers spun in circles beneath the moonlight, Angela stood by the fire pit, Dennis beside her. Abigail tugged at her hand, sticky with cider. "Will you dance with me?" the girl asked. Angela laughed. "I'm not much of a dancer." Dennis leaned in. "You pulled down a fence and saved a town. I think you can handle a few steps." Angela took Abigail's hand. And then she took Dennis's. They danced. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but fully, joyfully alive. The townspeople joined, laughter ringing into the stars. Angela looked around at the faces, the lights, the land she now helped protect. She was no longer a girl sold on a platform, judged for what she was. She was a woman who had built something, a life, a home, and finally, freedom under Western stars. Beside the man who saw her as just right, Angela found more than freedom. She found belonging, once sold as a burden. She became the heart that held a town together. If Angela's strength spoke to you, if standing tall against cruelty resonates, hit that like button. It shows us you want more stories like this one. And don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Echoes, where tales of grit, heart, and redemption ride strong through every dust trail. More unforgettable journeys await, just like Angela's. We'll see you on the next trail.